So if you don't know what DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. There we go. These guys are just, I mean, you look up the definition of bad news and you find DARPA's name in there. These guys are heavily involved with some seriously bad things. They're also the ones behind things like even like the internet and they helped with GPS stuff. As we know, we've talked about Martin Rothblatt in the past. He's also had his hands in the GPS navigation and stuff like that as well. And I mean, they really, really get into stuff, a lot of military projects, but a lot of the stuff that they develop doesn't come out for us to see. And then some of the other stuff that they do, they sneak it under the table and it's released by somebody else as just a, technological advancement or a health advancement type of thing, but they're no good. And along with that, with what they focus on, we understand that things are moving forward, specifically in transhumanism and the digital space, as well as health. And so we're going to be covering a few of those today. Now, as far as transhumanism and the digital space, I always go back to the quote by Kurzweil when he was asked the question of what is singularity. And Kurzweil explained that the singularity is the merger of our biological with technology, where there will be no distinction between human and machine or between physical and virtual reality. Now, as Christians, when we look in the Bible, it tells us mixing iron and clay. This is about getting man and machine hooked together. And he's talking about the singularity being to the point where you don't know where your biological ends and where the technology begins. He's talking about blending it so much that you don't even know the difference. Now, that's freaky. How they do it, I don't know. I'm not smart enough to figure that out, but that's what they're aiming for, and it's freaky. Remember, God's in control, though. Now, with things bulleting towards that assessment, a whole new wave of threats arise. And I mean, we've been seeing it in so many different ways with the AI stuff that's coming through, with the different things that we constantly see about brain chips. We understand things in the health side. We got to be careful about talking about that stuff. But we're seeing all these new threats arise that's really against us. And so DARPA is working on a defense against cognitive attacks through mixed reality systems. So what is mixed reality? We've heard of regular reality and we've heard of virtual reality. Well, mixed is combining both of those. So it's, say you were to put on a headset or goggles or even just glasses and wear them, you would still see everything, our normal reality, our objects in front of us, but then it can also be showing a virtual objects and things in the environment that way as well. So it's mixing both reality and virtual reality together. And this is something that they've really been working on. We've seen it with all the different headsets that they've been doing. But they're working on defense against cognitive attacks. Now, if they're doing that, obviously, they're also working on ways to increase and go on the offensive with attacks, and they can reverse engineer their defense, figure out ways to apply it offensively. And a lot of people just instantly think, oh, military. Well, my brain usually goes to us, because they're trying to shove us into virtual reality things all the time. And that's a good way of getting into us. Now, we'll talk about that in a second. Now, this program is called the Intrinsic Cognitive Security Research Program, or ICS. And so if we take a look at this, it's come straight from the Uncle Sam website itself. And it's the ICS. And it's given us some basic information. I always check this out. Now, it's a contract opportunity, and it's already been filled because this was a few days ago that this took place. But that doesn't mean the program itself has stopped. That just means that they're not seeking anybody anymore for this specific region. And so if we look at the description here, it might be a little too small for you guys. I'll go ahead and read it for you. It says the ICS program develops computational science to build tactical mixed reality systems. Here we go, the mixed reality again, that protect against cognitive attacks, or basically attacks against your brain. The core technical hypothesis of the program is that formal methods can be extended with cognitive guarantees and models to protect mixed reality users from cognitive attack. So it's just a fancy way of saying we're working on defense systems to protect the wearer, whoever's wearing the mixed reality system. And so, again, a lot of people instantly think military, which, yeah, that could definitely play a part. But again, I want to focus more on the civilian side of things because, as we know, they're constantly doing psychological warfare to us. This is something I've really been paying attention to a lot lately because this is really where Satan, I'm not even going to say them, this is really where Satan is hitting us, is through our brains. So the ICS program says to build tactical mixed reality systems that protect against cognitive attacks. So we're entering a time of mixing both the real and the virtual world together in both military and PSYOP warfare. Us. Which takes the battlefield into another dimension. Now, I use the word dimension on purpose because when we start getting into mixing reality and virtual reality and anything that has to do with our minds, we are adding a whole new element of demonic attacks to us. We already have a hard enough time just going through our daily lives without all that junk trying to fend off these demonic attacks. Now we're adding a whole new level, a whole new dimension to this. And it's much, much easier when you have this what's real and what's not around us for them demonic attacks to start making a play. So it can be a much grander scale. So this is another reason why I think they heavily want to start putting us in a virtual reality type of thing. Even if it's not 100%, even if it's only 50% of the time, it's so much more dangerous for the human brain to be involved with that, especially since we know what they can do with sounds, especially we know what they do with media and whatnot. You start adding in a virtual reality thing and it's not good, especially since we know artificial intelligence and AI. Again, we're looking at, that could be possessed that easy by demons, and we don't even want to start playing with that stuff. So, according to DARPA's ICS description, let's take a look at some of the attacks that they're talking about so we can kind of get an idea of what we might possibly see coming up in the future. I would say relatively soon, honestly. So, mixed reality attacks. 1, information flooding to increase equipment latency and induce physical illness. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever played like video games or anything like that here. I'll try and explain it if you haven't. Latency or lag is something where you would tell it to do, say you want to jump. Well, if lag would be you press the jump button and then a half a second later, then he jumps. There's a bit of a gap between when you press the input and when it actually happens. Now, if you start flooding equipment with that type of thing, it can definitely cause an illness of some type to you, whether motion sickness or, induced physical illness. I don't know how far they're going to take that, but that's definitely something to keep in mind. Then they've got planting real world objects to overwhelm displays. Just pull up YouTube and see how many ads pop up in your face. Can you imagine virtual world where ads are just constantly going across your face? Just think of something kind of like that, overwhelming in that area. Subverting a personal area network to sow confusion. I'm not sure what they classify personal area network. They don't give that description, so I'm not exactly sure, but definitely bringing in confusion is something to pay attention to. Injecting virtual data to distract personnel. So again, you're starting to maybe throw in a virus or something like that into their system to distract them. Using objects to overwhelm a user with confusing false alarms. That one's just basic. You're in a building and there's a false alarm. Everybody run out of the building type of thing. You start throwing off sirens and whatnot. You can definitely overwhelm them. Assessing user status through an eye tracker. You want to talk about gaining biometric data? Try wearing virtual reality goggles where they're constantly scanning your eyes. They can get a whole lot of data from you and other potential attacks, so they don't really go in depth on that. So they give us an idea, general description, but they don't necessarily explain what all these things mean. So we can just kind of go off of the basic descriptions of what they tell us. But when we look at that stuff, we can definitely see that stuff playing an effect, whether it's through lag or trying to access our data, trying to subvert and confuse us, give us false information. I mean, this stuff can be used. I mean, again, just take what we do on our computers and throw it on our eyes, and you're adding a whole new level of what they can do in that way. Now, from the military perspective, this may not apply to us much because I mean, some of those are definitely they're talking about military in that perspective, but it definitely reveals the possibilities of subversion, deception, and psychological damage that it can do to us. I'm not quite sure if we all have a firm grasp of just how weak and puny our brains actually are. Um, the idea of planting ideas and thoughts into people's heads, it can be done so easy. People want to think it's a very complex process, but it can be done so easy. They do it to us all the time. Again, open up your news feed. Doesn't matter if it's social media, doesn't matter if it's right wing, left wing, doesn't matter where you get it. The ideas are constantly planting in our heads, and they can have an entire paragraph of good information, but if one sentence changes the entire paragraph and it's fake, the whole thing goes belly up. And now you have this notion of, you believe this because all of it sounds right, but that one sentence changes the whole thing and you don't even realize it. So this stuff is happening all the time, and it can be done using these systems at a commercial scale. Now we're seeing the slow introduction of virtual environments through things like the VR headsets. There's several of them out there: HP Reverb, HTC Vive, PlayStation VR, and VR sets like the Apple Pro Vision, and even things like Google Glasses. I don't know how many of you remember Google Glasses, but it's just a regular set of glasses and stuff can pop up on your screen. Didn't go very far, but I don't think they've stopped that project. And they're also working on contact lens things that they can do that stuff with too. They're going way deeper than I think people realize. And so while it's not widely used yet, we see where this direction's going. So again, this is something that we don't necessarily see widely used, but go back a year. How often was AI programs used back then? And look at how quickly they've become mainstream and widely used today. That should just tell you that they are pounding that accelerator to get in that direction that they want. And they're going to do that with these too at some point. I'm not going to sit here and tell you when, but they are working on it. And normalizing these realities open up a whole nother avenue for governments, military, corporations, and of course, the biggest one of them all, Satan, to attack. Anything from real-time ability to see what you're seeing, to know what you're feeling, and of course, to plant objects, text, sound, or other visuals to achieve the desired reaction from you. Now, they can obviously get the ability to see what you're seeing. That one seems pretty obvious to us, but to know what you're feeling, they are adding these elements into these machines to pick up what your brain is putting out, to know what you're feeling, what's going on in your body. I've talked about this stuff all the time. There's constantly new things that they're working on to just understand what you're feeling. And we've talked about how they're trying to apply that data into robots. We just talked about last week with the electronic tongue. They're trying to make AI so they can taste food. And they're trying to add that human level to robots. So they're going to be scanning that stuff. Obviously, your digital twin has something to play with that. We'll talk about that in a second. And of course, they're going to feed you these things to try and get the desired reaction, whether it's anger, emotion, happiness, doesn't matter. They're going to try and feed you and get you in that direction. We see this now, again, with the news and media, but being able to use AI to know exactly what button to push, what button they need to push on you in real time is much more effective than the outcome for the outcome that they're seeking. So right now, they can feed information into the media, but that takes a while to get the ball rolling with how to push the button on you. If they have real-time information of what you're feeling and what you're thinking, AI can then pick up exactly what they need to get a reaction out of you in that exact moment. Now, again, that might sound sci-fi, but I mean, look at what we're living in now. This would be considered sci-fi if you go back 2 years. They are working on this stuff. It's absolutely insane, the things that they're trying to put out in AI and robotics and all of this technology. And it's important to understand that it's impossible to keep anonymous while using these systems, these peripherals. Not only does it have constant scans of your eyes, obtaining your biometric data, which we understand they are in full court press with this. Everybody knows whether it's your finger, whether it's your face, whether it's your eyes, whether it's, I mean, even your body movement, even if it's your heartbeat. They've got lasers that can scan your heartbeat because everybody has a unique heartbeat in them. They want your biometric data. They want you in that database. They want a profile of you. And so if you're constantly wearing these glasses, they're constantly scanning your eyes. They get it. Plus, it also tracks your patterns of movement, which of course is all unique to us as well. This is something I've talked about a lot when you have all these Internet of Things appliances around you, like your Ring doorbell, your Tesla car, the smart city street lights, the biometric scanners, whether you're walking in a Walmart or your grocery store, your smart TV, your smart computer, your smart phone, smart appliances, your coffee pot and your refrigerator, even those are keeping tabs on you. And we've talked about how even the automated robot things are scanning you and taking pictures as well. They are tracking your patterns of life. They're tracking your patterns of movement. Everybody moves uniquely, and they're attaching that to your digital twin profile. A lot of people think digital twin profile, that's ridiculous. There is videos at CERN conferences talking about your digital twin, and they have all of your social media. They have recordings and video of you. They have your DNA. They have your biometric data. They have your patterns of life. And they want all of that so they can shove it into their database and use it. We have different theories and ideas, but ultimately we really don't know what they're trying to do with it in the final push. And I've talked about this before with predictive programming. We see movies and books and games and all these things talking about all of these things, showing you, conditioning us to be prepared for it. You go back several years, there's no way that we could do. I'll use this as an example. I love this movie. It's a great movie. I'm not recommending it because there's a lot of language, but I don't do as I say, not as I do. But it's called Enemy of the State. And this was back in the 90s. And it has to do with, you know, the satellite keeping tabs, little microphones and video cameras that they have going on. And you go back 10 years before that movie came out, and when people watch it, they're like, oh, that's such a great movie. There's no way they do that. Then we find out that they do it. Then you start looking at other systems that they're showing in movies like Eagle Eye or iRobot or The Matrix or Blade Runner or any of these sci-fi things where there's Minority Report, where there's eye scanners and stuff. We look at that stuff back then and goes, oh, that's cool. They're never going to do it. And look at what they're doing now. They're doing the exact same stuff. And so when it comes to the Internet of Things, keeping full tabs and creating your profile, there are predictive programming media that is conditioning for that. And so I've used this video before because I think it's one of the best representations for this. And if I can see it, there it is. So this comes from a game called Watch Dogs. This is a video game that has to do with the Internet of Things and a smart city built in Chicago, which eventually spread all across the United States. This is a little cinematic clip in there that's explaining this system. And I'm telling you, they are telling us, this game is telling us what they are building right now. So pay attention to this.
Coordinated from the heart of Silicon Valley, CTOS 2.0 has been implemented across the United States, ushering in the Internet of Things. 6.4 billion connected devices now serve as collection points, mapping and recording our daily routines, making a more secure and more invasive system. But who else is listening? Big Brother no longer works alone. Thousands of little brothers monitor and aggregate your every move, building a complete digital profile of you to be bought, sold, or stolen in an instant. Toys study your children, reporting their play habits back to marketers. Appliances, consoles, and home security systems give corporations a window into your private life. Control of your vehicle and mobile device can now be breached remotely by anyone at any time. You may think that you are immune or underestimate the risk, but your digital shadow is already compromised. Insurance companies use algorithms to monitor your life habits and limit or deny coverage. Health providers determine if your cancer is worth treating. Search results and news feeds are skewed to bias mood and influence your vote, engineering social uprisings on a massive scale. You are now less valuable than the data you produce. This is the new reality. Going dark is no longer an option.
Any of that look familiar? Because everything that video was showing us, which came out years ago, we are seeing not just being developed, but we're seeing it come online and is online today. What we thought was just something from a video game is exactly what we're seeing today. And they're talking about building a digital profile with all the smart appliances keeping tabs on everything, including your own health. And we're going to talk about that in a second. This is, as the video said, the new reality. And there's no going dark. And we've talked about that in the past. We've talked about another organization called DARPA, and they've got their Haystack program that is built to scan, to track anybody who lives off the grid in rural areas, even underground. And they've got all that stuff online as we speak. So I know a lot of this sounds freaky, and I know a lot of people sound, they're like, oh, how do we avoid it? We can't. But ultimately, I always like to tell people, we've got all of this surveillance on us, all this tracking on us, and they have all this information on us. While they may be watching us, God is watching them. That's the biggest thing to understand, is God is watching them. And guess what? He knows more about all of them than they could ever possibly know about us. And I don't know about you guys, but to me, that is probably one of the most comforting things that I could ever hold on to. I used to be one of those people where I'd do everything I possibly could to avoid cameras and microphones and do all this stuff. I mean, yeah, I still tape like the webcam on my computer and stuff. I always put the lens cover on my camera when I'm done. But it's one of those things where I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to worry. I'm not going to go to the point of changing my entire life to try and avoid some of this stuff, because we can't. What you're trying to block from them, they've already got it. But you have to remember, God is above them. God is watching over us. And the biggest thing is, as long as you have the Lord Jesus Christ, when this stuff really starts to matter, we're not going to be here. That's the most important thing to understand, is, when these things really start to take a hold, you don't have to worry. And so I don't ever panic about that stuff. I don't ever worry about it. Again, I do the little things like keeping lens covers on my cameras and stuff, but I'm not going to go out there and change my entire life, because it doesn't matter ultimately. This is not our home. These are temporary bodies. And the biggest thing is the mark of the beast, which that we're not going to be here for that anyways. The Bible tells us that. So I just don't think there's anything to worry about. But this is what they're building towards. And if you don't have Jesus, I would get to him now, before the rapture. And if for some reason, somehow you're watching this after the rapture takes place, be prepared. It's going to get a lot worse than what I'm showing you. That's for sure.